All right, welcome. Today, we're going to look past all the marketing and get right to the very heart of your computer, the CPU. We're talking about a massive shift in technology, one that's going to completely redefine what computing power even means. For decades, the promise has been so simple, right? Every year, computers just get faster, thanks to the usual suspects, Intel and AMD. But what happens when that progress slams into a physical wall? The next revolution, the next great leap, it's not just a new chip from a company you already know. It's a total change in how we even build the things. But before we get way into the future, let's ground ourselves in right now. If you're building a PC today, you're smack in the middle of a very familiar and, let's be honest, a very competitive battlefield. When you're picking a CPU today, it's not really about what's the best CPU period, is it? It's about what's best for you. If you're all about competitive esports gaming where every single frame per second counts, something like an Intel i5 might be your go-to. But if you're doing heavy-duty stuff like video editing, well then the massive multi-core horsepower of an AMD Ryzen 9 is probably what you're looking for. It's a classic trade-off. So here's the lay of the land. Intel's really pushing hard on that raw, single-core speed, which is fantastic for stuff like gaming that leans on one super-fast processor. AMD, on the other hand, is just continuing to crush it with multi-core performance, handling tons of tasks at once and being incredibly power-efficient while doing it. The choices we have now are great, but the very foundation this whole competition is built on, well, it's starting to show some serious cracks. And that foundation? It's an invisible rule that has powered the entire tech industry for more than 50 years. You've probably heard of it, Moore's Law. And, well, it's kind of dying. Moore's Law sounds complicated, but the idea is actually super simple. It's this observation that we can cram twice as many tiny little switches, called transistors, onto a chip about every 2 years. And more transistors means more power. This law is the single reason the smartphone in your pocket is literally millions of times more powerful than the computers that took us to the moon. This relentless doubling has driven everything, from the first microprocessors back in the 70s to the multi-core beasts we have today. But just look at the end of that timeline. Here in the 2020s, we are getting dangerously close to a hard physical limit. These transistors are getting so unbelievably small, we're talking just a few atoms wide, that the laws of physics are starting to push back. And hey, you don't have to take my word for it. This recent paper from Advanced Functional Materials says it pretty bluntly. It's becoming increasingly challenging to increase performance solely by increasing the number of transistors. The bottom line is, the old trick of just shrinking things down, it's just not enough anymore. And this leads us to the single biggest question in computing today. If we can't shrink things down anymore, where on earth do we go from here? The answer is about to completely reshape the chips of the future. The first part of that answer is actually pretty brilliant. If you can't build out anymore, you have to build up. We need to start thinking about our chips in 3 dimensions. Think about it this way. For 50 years, chip design has basically been like building a sprawling, single-story bungalow. We just kept making the rooms smaller and smaller to fit more in. The new approach is to build a skyscraper, stacking layers of circuits right on top of each other. This lets you dramatically increase the density without shrinking parts down to impossible sizes. You know, we've actually been moving this way for a while. The old school planar transistor, that was our flat bungalow. Then we got the FinFET, which is kind of like a townhouse, where the control gate, the on-off switch, wraps around the electrical channel on 3 sides. But the next big leap is the GAA FET, or gate all-around transistor. This is our skyscraper. The gate completely surrounds the channel, which gives engineers incredible control and efficiency. But changing the architecture, the blueprint, is only half the battle. To actually build this computational skyscraper, we also need a totally new, revolutionary building material to replace the good old silicone we've been using for decades. So say hello to the carbon nanotube, or CNT for short. Picture this. You take a sheet of graphene, which is a layer of carbon that's only 1 atom thick, and you roll it up into a perfect microscopic tube. Well, it turns out these little tubes have absolutely incredible electrical properties that make them pretty much the ideal candidate for our future transistors. And here is the proof of just how much better they are. This chart shows something called carrier mobility, which is really just a fancy way of saying how fast electrons can move through a material. Okay, look at silicon way over on the left.
Now, look at the aligned carbon nanotubes on the right. Whoa! They don't just beat silicon, they completely blow past the performance targets set by the entire industry. This is a huge leap in raw performance potential.
So let's put it all together. We have a new architecture, the 3D skyscraper, and we have a new material, the carbon nanotube. When you combine these two revolutionary ideas, you really start to see what the future of computing is going to look like. The ultimate goal here is to create what scientists are calling monolithic 3D, or M3D chips. These will combine those advanced 3D skyscraper designs, like the GAA FET, with carbon nanotube materials instead of silicon. And that combination promises a future of chips that aren't just faster, but also way, way more power efficient. Now, of course, we're not quite there yet. This isn't science fiction, but it is definitely cutting-edge science. Researchers are still working through some major hurdles, like figuring out how to make perfectly pure carbon nanotubes at a massive scale, optimizing their performance, and this is the big one, figuring out how to manufacture these super complex 3D chips without them costing a fortune. The way forward is becoming clear, though. For generations, our entire digital world was built on silicon, a material we literally dug out of the ground. The next era, it's going to be built on materials that are engineered at the atomic level. And that leaves us with a pretty fascinating final thought. What if the heart of your next computer isn't mined from the earth, but is actually grown in a lab?